Hello, I'm Joe Ruggiero, and welcome to my podcast, Inspired, and the people who inspire me. I think we're in for some interesting information. My guest today is Julie Goldman, and she is making her business multifunctional and multifaceted. And I think that she's got a lot to tell our designers who are interested in building their business. How she did it. So let's hear it, Julie.
Hi, Joe. It's so great to see you, and thank you so much for having me. This is such a beautiful setting.
Absolutely.
So where should we begin?
Well, let's talk about where you began.
Okay.
And then why you felt it was necessary for you to make it more of a multi-level business.
Okay, great. So I was born and raised in New Orleans.
Oh.
My family is still in New Orleans. I'm the only person in my immediate family that fled. And I do work in New Orleans still periodically, which I love. I grew up, people usually talk about their origin stories, about, how their parents came from nothing. I'm sort of from the other side of things. I did not come from nothing.
Oh.
My great-grandfather came from nothing and built quite a substantial business in New Orleans that no longer exists. So it's sort of I forget what the saying is, of shirt sleeves to suits or something. We're the opposite. So I grew up most certainly with a silver spoon in my mouth, but that...
What was the business?
The real estate and real estate investment, commercial development. And my grandparents and my great-grandparents were very involved culturally in New Orleans, and my grandmother in particular was majorly involved in the New Orleans Museum of Art and built a fairly substantial art collection. And through a series of I don't even know what to call it, missteps and things like that along the way, as people passed away and poor decisions were made, the family business is no longer. And that happened during the course of my, from my young adulthood until, maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
Well, I can relate to you because my grandfather, who died at a young age, at 39, of pneumonia, because they didn't know how to treat it then, he was a multimillionaire. And my grandmother, God bless her, we call her Big Nonna, she was able to rescue that money from his brothers. But, he was very generous with the cookie jar money. So she lived off that for quite a while. But I mean, I'm talking front page of the New York Times, fighting for what she claimed were her just desserts. And they were. She had 4 kids by that point.
Yeah, we've certainly had our share of family squabbles over the years, but the family business is no longer, and it's been at least a generation that it was sort of dissolved. But what has been interesting for me is the survival of the family name. So my business is J. Ladder Design, and that was it's my middle name. It was my grandmother's maiden name, and it's always been a big part of my identity, and certainly my cultural education, my exposure to the art world and beauty and design. So really, when I started out, I started at 17 working for a well-known but very small design firm in New Orleans called Holden and Dupuy. And they were known as the Anns, Ann Holden and Ann Dupuy.
I know them.
Yes, and Ann Dupuy was my mentor and took me under her wing when I was in high school. We were, very dear friends with one another. And her partner, Ann Holden, and then an office manager, and it was just sort of the 3 or 4 of us taking on huge projects all over the country. And, times were different then. It was pre-internet, makes me sound, very old, but it was pre-internet. It was, I think their first project was on the cover of a major magazine. Things just sort of happened magically.
I did HGTV with both of them.
Yes, I'm sure you did. And So I went off to college really not knowing what to study and not being really sort of encouraged to study anything, really just anything that I wanted, because those were the days of, you really just are going to go off from the South and look for a husband or find something that interests you. And reality.
Why California?
I didn't move to California until I was married. I actually went to college on the East Coast and I studied art history and really fell in love with learning how artists source their materials, particularly medieval, early artists. And I graduated college, I moved back to New Orleans, continued working for Anne & Anne, and I moved to Chicago when I was in my early 20s. And I worked retail, opened the Crate and Barrel store on Michigan Avenue, which was very exciting. And I slowly made my way back into design. I started working in the film business in the design part of film. It just felt like a natural fit to me, and learning how sets were made and production design and how the sets were decorated. I met my husband there, and he was a filmmaker, and about 25 years ago we moved to LA. And within a couple of months of us living here, I started working at a little design shop in West Hollywood and started taking my own clients.
Well, you know that this was Warner Ranch.
Yes, we were just talking about that in the other room. That is so fascinating.
And the movies that were shot here are just all, they would build villages.
It's
and
phenomenal.
then just knock them down and do something else. A lot of Westerns.
I'm just so inspired by the craftsmanship.
Yes.
And I remember...
And the research.
Yes. At the time, I remember when I was working in production, Anne would frequently see my work and ask, how did you do this? How is this hanging there? And I would say, oh, well, what you can't see is right out of frame, there's a big C-stand with a clamp holding up this wall. So I really... was interested in, yes, in the technical aspects of it, but how things worked and how things were made. And that was really, what drew me into design, the fabrication and talking to the makers.
Well, you did a big restoration project
in
New Orleans.
That's right. I just completed my second restoration project for actually the same client, who is a very high-end caterer. And the first project I did with them was a building that they purchased that actually my dad told me when he was a child was a farmer's market with the tiled walls and everything. And over the years it had become an office building and even a graphic design studio. We renovated that, and now it's a venue for weddings. It's called Il Mercato, and it got all kinds of awards and tax credits for maintaining the history of the building.
How exciting.
The place I just finished with them is called the New Orleans Board of Trade, and it was actually the Board of Trade where on chalkboards on the wall they, wrote down the pricing of cotton or coffee or whatever came up the river that was being traded. And we just completed a multi-million-dollar renovation of that space, which is just phenomenal. It's the same catering company that's involved in that project, and they open to the public and are available for, weddings and other large parties.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
so
fascinating.
you're back to your roots.
Yeah, it really was like a love letter to the city. I mean, it's an exquisite space, and New Orleans is very... can be very fancy.
Yes.
And I really felt like it needed a venue that wasn't a hotel where people could throw black tie weddings.
Right.
And so I really wanted the space to be able to support people who wanted to host those kind of events.
Now tell me, how did you design your business? Because you deal with staging, you still deal with interior design, and now real estate.
So, as I said, my husband's in the film business. He travels a lot. And my family business was real estate. So we were always talking about real estate at home. And I understood, how a deal worked and all the moving parts of it. And I had a client here in Los Angeles who was interested in doing a flip on a house. And she reached out to me about working on the design, and I learned, immediately that I realized immediately that I wanted to learn more about the process, specifics involved in selling a house. And her agent, who's actually now my real estate partner, was just amazing. And I thought, well, I'm doing almost everything for this house, and I understand, the layout and the floor plan and all of those things, but I wanted to understand more about, what people are looking for in terms of the structure, what's going on with the plumbing, where does the sewer line go, how does the structure of the house support the functionality of the house.
Right.
In any event, after doing that deal with her, I decided, well, I'm just going to get my license. People are talking to me all the time about, well, if I add a bathroom or if I take over this bedroom and make it into a closet, how will it affect the value of my home? So about 7 years ago, I got my license. And in a couple of instances, I have sold homes to clients and then after the fact, been hired by them to redesign the home, remodel the kitchen, reconfigure the bathrooms, that type of thing. But I really, while the business is all in one, I really keep the two sort of wings separate from each other. So if you hire me to buy or sell your home, I really have on one hat of, thinking about the investment that you've made or are intending to make, and how to best serve, your investment. I have a fiduciary responsibility to my clients, whereas in design, you're focused on how the house can best serve their lifestyle. Mm-hmm. You do sort of, as a designer, like you, I've always wanted to have my clients invest in upholstery pieces that are going to last, not just inexpensive, out of a catalog kind of piece type of thing. So it's really been like a happy blend of the left side and the right side of my brain. So it's like using the business side of the design business in the real estate and using the design side of my design business when I'm helping a client, figure out if this home can grow with them and will be a good fit for their lifestyle.
The staging is questionable because where do you get the product?
So to be honest, I don't do a lot with staging, but I will work with reputable stagers and guide them a lot on what they want. I mean, as you know, staging in many cases can make or break the sale of a house. And don't be fooled. I have a lot of input as to, what kind of pieces I want to see in a space. And so really, I just work closely with, some of my favorite stagers, and now it's a shorthand to sort of say, that couch we used at such and so, bring that one in here. And I'll work with rug vendors or artists that I work with.
You have no ideas of warehousing all these?
I have no interest
products.
in warehousing. After years in production, I'm not a minimalist personally, but I try not to accumulate a lot of things. What I do accumulate, I have in my little shop in West Hollywood, and typically
so that's
offer that for sale. Third, yes. So it's a triumvirate of.
So tell me about the shop.
So the shop is called Maquette, which many people don't understand what that word is, but as you know, is an artist's model.
Right.
And it's I have a partner in the shop too. So it is just a little studio in a great area on West 3rd Street where we offer, vintage things that we have purchased for projects or find on our travels and offer those for sale.
I think I've been in the shop because
you might have.
My daughter used to live on Flores.
Oh, it's right near
3rd.
there. It's right near there.
Yeah.
It's a great area and one of the few little walkable pockets in LA. There's great restaurants,
Right.
a lunch place, Jones on 3rd,
Jones
that's
on
very
3rd.
popular.
Yep.
Yes, it's like basically our kitchen. My husband makes fun of me for how often we eat there. And, we really want it to be an environment where other designers can come and source for their projects, where people can, source for their homes and find one-of-a-kind, beautifully made wares. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do you spend most of your time designing in maquette or?
It's sort of a mixture. I've found, to your question earlier about diversifying my business, I found that, I'll hear, in fact, the other day, a designer texted in this group chain of designers that I'm a part of. What do you all have in your pipeline? What do you do when your pipeline is drying up? I don't want to say I never had a pipeline, but it was very word of mouth how I've worked over the years. And so for me, it just more made sense to diversify rather than double down on my design business.
You have several pipelines.
Exactly. So I felt like I'm just going to do this thing over here. So while I may spend a month at Maquette working on something, usually for the store, although my design library is there, I may then spend 2 months out in the field prepping a listing for somebody or with a buyer shopping for homes. And, in my design business, I just spent the last 2 years very intensively on this New Orleans project, but I could work a lot at night. My draftsperson and I would communicate at night, and so I'd be designing at night with her online. And then during the day, I could go to real estate meetings and meet with clients, go see homes, and it really, I just found that mix really worked for me, especially with, I have high school and college-age children, and it just, having that diversity was always more appealing to me than digging deeper or trying to have multiple design projects going on.
Well, your husband is gone for...
Yeah, he, especially since COVID, he's traveled a lot.
Yeah.
So he'll be gone for, 6 months at a time, with visits, obviously, in between, or family visits. We'll go see him. COVID has changed that to a certain extent. But it was really important to my psychological well-being that I had other things going on and other things to think about besides someone's carpet, which is important, but not always.
Do you have sub-managers or?
I have a project.
people?
Yes, I have a good support team in my design business. I have a project manager and an admin and a bookkeeper. I have a couple of people that work for us at the shop, but I have a partner in the shop and a partner in real estate, and then good support in the design practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how big is the staff?
The design store is sort of a hodgepodge of young people who typically are interested in the design world, who are creative and enthusiastic. Some of them, are very young, still in college even, and exploring what the design world is. And so it's really an incubator for them to be able to learn about different artisans, to learn about different styles, certainly to learn customer service and how the ordering process works. But I keep my design team pretty lean with a project manager and an admin, and depending upon, our project load, I can keep them busy full-time, or, if there's a window, they may take on a project of their own or work with another designer.
Now, do you hire interns?
I would hire an intern for the shop, and I think I would probably hire an intern, not personally, but to sort of be like support to me in all of the businesses, because it's really, I've said to people before, it's almost like a salad bar. Some days you're heavy on the cheese, and other days you're heavy on maybe the cauliflower or something like that. So I would have an intern, because everything revolves around, residential world. And so is it a plumbing problem? I just sold a house last week where the plumbing wasn't vented properly. And so there's an opportunity there for them to learn what's involved in plumbing venting, which isn't really design related. And typically when it's design stuff and we're talking about plumbing, we're talking about fixtures and functionality and making sure you have water pressure and hot water and how the fixtures look. But typically on design projects, if I'm talking to a plumber, I don't care how something's vented. You stay in your lane and you tell me how it should be vented. But as a realtor, I want to make sure I understand that. And
how are you dealing with the people who have lost everything in the fires?
It's so devastating. It certainly has made me think long and hard about what we hold on to and the things that we accumulate. I have some friends whose in-laws, her parents, lost their house of 60 plus years.
Wow.
And that's just devastating for them. I mean, they're in their 80s and, we've talked a little bit about whether or not they want to rebuild, and I'm sure they do, but I think to me it really rings of Katrina. And while I didn't personally go through Katrina, I was not living in New Orleans at the time, my family did. And, yes, you've lost all of these physical things, which is so much of our business, but what you've really lost is your community. And when I think about some of these homeowners in Altadena or in the Palisades trying to rebuild, I think it's what they're really hoping for is to regain that community of neighbors, of the shorthand that you have with your pharmacist or your doctor. And post Katrina, it was very similar. I mean, doctors left. A large part of my extended family left after generations of being in New Orleans. And my heart just really goes out to them because it's such a monumental challenge for people to tackle, in addition to whatever they need to do to support their livelihood. It is a full-time job to navigate insurance claims and decision making.
Will it
come back?
Yeah.
I think it'll come back. I think, though, that what that coming back is going to be completely different from what it used to be. I mean, there's areas in New Orleans that have come back, but it's been 20 years since Katrina, and it may feel like a blink of an eye, but for those people who had to live through, paying mortgages and navigating their insurance company and being rejected from their companies or taking a payout or whatever, it's a lot of headaches, and it's really, we could spend hours talking about the.
Well, let's just give a few minutes to what your firm can do to help these displaced persons.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. I think what is unusual about my firm is that I do have this real estate perspective.
Yes.
That typically many, while people are struggling with the loss of their personal belongings and the ease of, getting out of bed in the morning and know exactly where your coffee cup is or your alarm clock is, I guess it's your phone charger. That's really, where they want to get back to. But to have the perspective on someone's lifestyle inside the home is sort of the design piece, but to understand their investment is the real estate piece. And, my goal is to, get people into a home that serves them in both ways. That's meeting their needs fiscally, and that they're not overextended, that they don't feel scared or stressed about the process. In fact, this couple that I was talking about, do they rebuild at 80 something years old? I don't know that I would take that project on, or I would encourage someone to do. How much value is in their land? And sitting down with them, and really, with any family, sitting down to discuss, how much value is in the land.
Right.
Do you want to rebuild? Do you want to, what's involved in rebuilding? How long is it going to take to rebuild? Is that something you would want to undertake?
Right.
Not from the design perspective, but from the real estate perspective. So in looping in the design piece, I'm inspired by some of these groups that have cropped up, offering basic plans, which I think is just such a genius idea. Almost like the Sears catalog,
Right.
where you could buy a model. I think that solves so many headaches for people to be able to have access to architecturally approved plans that are in keeping with, like in Altadena, in keeping with the style of the architecture that was there, and to be able to select a set of plans and work from that place, knowing that all you really need to do is pick your finishes. And that, certainly as a designer, I could help somebody do that, could help
So
them.
is that as a rental or
No, that would be as
a purchase?
a purchase. That there are companies developing a variety of plans for people to choose from. So, Joe, do you want the Warner model? Do you want the 3-bedroom version? And then, how do you want to customize that?
Right.
Those areas are really interesting to me from a design perspective. But again, from the real estate perspective, it's typically people's biggest investment. And so I want to be able to support families as they're navigating whether they should rebuild, whether they should sell,
Right.
and what works best for them and their family. And in many instances in Altadena, multi-generations were, living in the same home. And so how are you
Because-
going to accomplish that?
They're still paying mortgage.
Yes.
They're still paying
Yes.
taxes on
Yes.
the empty hole.
Yes, yes. My dad had water up to his ceiling during Katrina, and in New Orleans, as you know, or may not remember, the government gave people trailers to live in, FEMA
Right,
trailers. So he
right.
was living in a FEMA trailer on his land that was hooked up, to the gas or to the electric company and the water company, and he lived on his land, on his trailer, because that's where he was paying the mortgage on the house that he
Right.
couldn't occupy. So I think that's really a complicated thing for people to navigate, and to find somebody, like myself, who understands the challenges that you
Yes.
face. It's really shocking to people to learn that you still have to pay your mortgage on
That's
your
right.
house that doesn't exist anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, how will these trailers work in LA?
I don't know. I don't know that there's any talk
No.
of bringing trailers. I haven't heard anything about that. Maybe, they thought Louisiana folk were more equipped to live in a trailer than Palisades people. But I don't know that's been brought to the table.
Right.
And, that certainly came with its own headaches of living in a trailer. Fortunately, my dad was living by himself, but I could only imagine, like I said, families with multi-generations, if they
Yes.
would. I don't know how they are coping. I think it's really just one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, with your knowledge, what you can do to help these folks. And I find your thought process fascinating.
Thank
And
you.
I wanted to have you on as a guest because I wanted you to give inspiration to other designers who are trying to relate to what's going on in the environment and also what's happening in the real estate and design and staging businesses.
I mean, I really appreciate you saying so and calling attention to that, because I think, much of our design world is luxury. I mean, it is a luxury to be able to afford an interior designer to help you pick out things
That's
for your
right.
home. I've always been somewhat practical. And perhaps that was a result of, what's happened to my family. But I think that understanding how the systems work, how, home systems work, how mortgages work, how your taxes are, what their charges are based on, to give people really a holistic understanding of how they live and how they raise their families, and the places where they're able to relax and recharge.
Right.
Everybody needs a home, and everybody deserves to have a place that supports their best way of life.
That's right. Well, thank you, Julie Goldman, for your insight. And I wish you lots of luck in helping people with future decisions
Thank you, Joe.
and current decisions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.